Stock of the day is Cettire. Now this, if you don't mind me saying, is the stock that many love to hate, even though it keeps coming through with the goods. So in a trading update today, the online high-end fashion retailer reported sales revenue up 88% for the quarter, adjusted earnings of $6 million on a 20% plus margin. It's also confirmed plans for a launch in China in the fourth quarter. Now, Satire also says that the U.S. business is going strong, conversion rates are improving, and average order values are growing. It also says that it's growing profitably. It poured cold water on allegations it's not in good standing in some states in regards to sales tax, though there was no mention in the release of accusations that it's also not fully compliant with customs charges. That's a story that blew up last month, if you recall. Now, shares initially looked pretty positive on this update, but have since lost a lot of ground, down by 6%. So I just thought I'd be a bit cheeky and put this one to Claude Walker from A Rich Life and Luke Winchester from Merewether Capital. But Claude, I'm going to start with you because if I'm not mistaken, I heard a little bit of a tutter when we were talking about profitable growth for Cettire.
I'm not sure I caught exactly what you just said there, Nadine, so sorry if I don't answer that directly, but I guess the real issue for Cettire isn't really the quarterly numbers. The real issue has to do with the questions that have been asked about how they maintain such low prices, and do they at all times, have they always been in accordance with all of the sales tax laws in the US, various different states there. I'm sure it can be very complicated. Are there any issues regarding whether people, have they in the past had an estimate where someone might say, oh, I think I'm paying $200 and something sales tax, but actually Cettire doesn't end up paying that amount of sales tax, or they calculate it differently so that there's some sort of discrepancy there. So I'd say that's the main thing that's sort of influencing the stock at the moment, because if this isn't a problem, if this is no problem whatsoever, then I guess that sort of growth story, and indeed a profitable growth story, because when we first started talking about Cettire a few years ago, they hadn't really proven that they could be profitable. Now, I'm not saying that I think that they're even cheap based on a PE ratio or anything, but at the same time, they do have fast growth if they do have good, clean profits, and they are in accordance with all of the sales tax in the past, and there are no changes that are going to affect coming forward. Like, for example, if they've now changed the way that they present and calculate sales tax, etc. at the checkout, does that affect sales growth going forwards? And none of that's really in these results we got today. So that's why I think that you probably might have a look at the results and say, oh, it should be trading up because active customers up 84%. Sales revenue cracking along as usual, plus 80%, 88% on the prior corresponding period. I think maybe what the market's also reacting to is, what isn't in there. Like, are there concerns about, all of these other issues going forward, and as a result, that's what's probably going to play out over the next 6 months or however long it takes for that either to clear the air or to become an ongoing problem. There was a bit of a comment on the US sales tax at the bottom of their announcement today.
Yeah,
and that might be more what's sort of driving the share price.
Yeah, okay, but as far as a company that you would like to buy and hold?
Look, no. The only time I've ever traded Cettire stocks was at the beginning when it was IPO'd. There was a hurdle, I think it was like 86 cents. They just basically had to get the share price to trade at 86 cents, and there would be a huge award of I think it was shares or options or performance rights or something like that to the CEO. Now that they ended up cancelling that provision, but that I knew that just created this huge incentive for that to happen. So I think that was a poor governance decision in the IPO, and I think ever since then it's just been really hard to get a good read on whether it is a stock I do want to back. So as a result, I've just let this one go through to keep it, Nadine. I haven't participated in its strong growth, from $1 to $3 where it is now. And there were some times when its sales and marketing were crazy high, and I said so at the time, and they did bring that down. They did start getting towards profitability. So I'm more just sitting on the fence. It's too hard for me to have a view because there's this other area of it that I I don't want to take a bet on, basically.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Luke? I mean, yeah, you could have made a lot of money on Cettire so far, but there are question marks hanging over the business.
For sure. And I call these battleground stocks, Nadine, where you have, shorters and people who are long the stock, often quite publicly going back and forth about their opinions and whatnot. And this is one of the best battleground stocks I've ever seen. And the reason why is because the business itself is so close to the chest with a lot of details, not just financially, but operationally of how the business works, where they source product from, the explosion in customers and website traffic that most other e-commerce platforms literally spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to try and build these sorts of networks and e-commerce marketplaces. Yet, Cettire does it almost overnight with very little capital behind it. And so the shorts will look at that and say these questions have never been addressed, and more questions have just popped up since the sales tax and all that sort of stuff, which Claude covered well. Yet people who are long the stock just have to point to the operational numbers. And even in this update, it continues. 90% growth is almost absurd for the size of the business now and to where it's getting. You'd be expecting just the law of large numbers to kick in at some point, that growth rate to moderate, but it simply hasn't. They've been close to triple digits now for like 3 or 4 years. I think the reaction to the share price today is probably on the profitability. So his top line was very nice, but that EBITDA margin actually fell from about 7% to 3%. Now, again, is that seasonality? Of course, Q3, you're coming off the strong second quarter with Christmas and retail sales are generally stronger. Maybe Q3 is just cyclically weak, or I think maybe what people would jump at and what the shorters would definitely try to suggest is this the first sign of, well, if you're now paying sales tax properly and remitting people properly, this is your ongoing margin around that 2 to 3% rather than the 7 to 8 where you've been in the past. I'm like Claude. I've sat on the sidelines. I find it infinitely entertaining. I think this is just one of the best stocks to debate. I wouldn't want to be there personally. There's too many question marks for me about that business model. Not so much where it's come from, but where it goes into the future. Like there's just plenty of examples of these businesses, far-fetched, obviously in the US being the largest, just being difficult to sustain because the luxury brands, the bigger you get, they end up wanting to come on and control that platform and control that distribution. I mean, they want to maintain the aura of luxury around their products, and you selling them cheap on a website obviously could potentially break that. So that's always been my concern. I've been on the sidelines. If you're there, look, this result operationally, I don't think it gives you a reason to hold it. Your thesis is intact. It's still growing to the moon, still profitable. If you've held Cettire before today, this update doesn't change anything. What I love, though, is that if you're a shorter of the stock, I don't think this update changes anything either. Like this will just keep being a great stock to debate, I think, into the near future. But I'm on the sidelines. But let's say a hold.
Yeah, not much of a debate here between you guys, but we'll leave that there. Thanks, guys.